Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ADL Exchange 2021. Hi, my name is Samantha Aviles, an intern at the Ateneo Salt Institute. With me today is Maria Luisa Isabel Rosales. She teaches Introduction to Law, Public International Law, and Legal Research and Writing. Please give a warm welcome to Ms. Rosales.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, yeah. Hi, good afternoon to everyone. Thanks for joining. Yeah. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. It's pretty nothing highly technical in what I'm sharing. I'm just sharing with you some of my own experiences as a member of the faculty of this part-time faculty member of the Ateneo de Manila University School of Law. I've been teaching since 2012, and so as experienced by everyone else here and everyone else around the world, the pandemic has caused quite a shift. So that's the basis for my sharings today. So again, the topic is directing law students focus online, and the reason behind the title will be clearer in a few seconds. So again, the context of my discussion for today is actually the only solid or empirical context is a survey done in the US. So not a Philippine survey. It's a survey done in 2014 about the well-being of mental health and well-being of law students, particularly in the US. This survey was conducted among 15 law schools with over 3,000 students participating. Based on that survey, it was evident that 96% of them stated that they experience not just stress, which is normal with any school setting, I believe, or anything that requires any credentials. They experience extreme stress. Then 18% experience depression, 37% anxiety, with 14% of them severe anxiety. And connecting to it, which is actually quite common, is the drinking culture. 22% have admitted to being binge drinkers. So why do these, it was one professor, one assistant professor, and one administrator of a law school who conducted this survey, along with the American Bar Association, funding from the American Bar Association. Why did they conduct this survey? High profile incidents involving the mental health of students and professors. Unfortunately, a trigger warning, suicides and other issues that brought forth a lot of the depression of a lot of people in the law school setting in particular. So the question arose on why is this the case with law schools in particular? One, based on this study, it showed that there is a stigma in the legal community in particular. It's a heightened stigma. I know there's a stigma elsewhere, but in the legal community, there's a heightened stigma about discussing mental health and well-being. Most law schools have a very stoic culture. Across the board, wherever you are, that stoic culture is prized. And another is a lack of trusted resources to help them. That's why they don't even get help or think about getting help when it comes to their well-being. This results in American law students having a rate of depression that is 4 times the average in a regular population or the general population. So again, this is a US study, empirical study. To my knowledge, there is no extensive Philippine study. There were a few questions and surveys sent out in certain law schools. I don't know if I'm allowed to divulge, but I know that certain law schools have touched on this topic. But why then do I believe it's true? Aside from my own experience, if you just look at the publicly available posts in discussion boards, you will see that many Filipinos in law schools, particularly Ateneans, feel the same way. Some words that will immediately jump out at you if you just browse through these publicly available. Again, I didn't hack any accounts or go into spaces I'm not allowed in. In these publicly available spaces, you'll see that they readily anonymously admit to the community that they are panicking when they haven't even started law school, and already the thought of starting law school is inducing panic in some people. They've heard horror stories. They think it's scary, but you think, okay, that's only for incoming freshmen. But as some of the screenshots that I'm sharing shows you, is that this isn't limited to freshmen. After they've gotten into law school and they've been there for a while, they still feel a certain degree of dread. And again, that's why I believe that at the very least, it would probably be true that here in the Philippines as well, that we'd probably have at least a higher rate of depression than the general population within the legal community. So when I began thinking about it, again, this isn't anything new. People in the faculty of law, in various faculties of law, have known about this situation for quite some time. But then again, the pandemic strikes, and last year we're hit with switching to online courses, right? And now there have been quite a number of studies discussing pandemic stress in particular, in the heightened tension. And another American body did study legal education in particular and the impact of the pandemic on it. And again, while it's US, based on anecdotal evidence and my own experience, I believe what some of their findings are applicable or are true as well in the Philippines, which is that 43% of them are worried about the type of information that or their ability to process the critical information through this remote setting. They believe that they aren't receiving the same quality of education. So, some people, or even I at the beginning, were like, well, what can we do? We can't control the pandemic, and it's for everyone's safety, right? So if we break down actually their concerns and their challenges, there are some challenges that we really can't do anything about, such as their own environment at home. But there are some things that we can do something about, and that is what I tried to focus on. Right? Because one of them, which you would think is something we can't do anything about, is the inability to influence the administrator's decision making. While I don't have any influence in the main administration of law school, at least with the administration of my own classroom, I believe that I can resolve this challenge for the student. So some of the principles that drive me in designing my online class, or when I use these online tools, is the idea of candor, right? Candor, transparency, and accountability. When I'm examining how I should pivot, I figure out whether or not these contribute to candor, transparency, and accountability in my own class. So again, with the US survey, they did have certain recommendations, right? They recommend specific recommendations in their law school, such as early intervention, random check-in emails so as not to isolate particular students. And when they are like frequently absent in your class, to note that and keep it in mind, and to allow for silence in the class, not pressure them to always say something, because that is an issue for introverts, and to reward positive behavior. So again, these are still very general recommendations. And so I had to think about how I would translate them in my own classroom in the Philippines. So one of the first things that I try to do is using, again, one keynote is I use my LMS simply as a supplement. It's to just set the tone or to prepare the students for discussion during synchronous sessions. One thing that's very important in law school, and I'm sure a lot of other professional schools as well, or in higher education, is the interaction, the live interaction. Discussion boards cannot replace the live interaction between the professor and the student. But there are some things that I can do in order to prepare me and them for the synchronous session. So one of them is at the start of the semester, I do have this anonymous, and it's not a mandatory quiz. I use the LMS, the Canvas function of quizzes, and it's a stress test. I didn't make it up. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. There are people who are experts out there who have come up with stress tests or ways to figure out, sorry, might not be able to see everything, or ways to figure out exactly whether or not the level of stress experienced by a person is of concern. So I took this from, the Canadian psychology website on determining whether or not the stress that a person is experiencing is something that should require action. So again, I do this in order to set the tone in class that this is something you should be taking into consideration. Because again, as much as I teach you, and no matter what materials I prepare for you, if you are stressed to the highest degree, then there is no way that you'll be absorbing anything that I'm telling you or anything that I'm making an effort on trying to tell you or work with you on, right? So it's really just, since it is anonymous, it's really for them to be alerted. Then I also provide resources at the end of the test. Like, again, it's up to them to take it. If they take it and they score a level that shows that they are highly stressed, I point them to resources. Again, sets the tone that this is a class that is cognizant of the stress, so it makes them feel heard, and yet it makes them accountable. Now that you know that you're stressed and I gave you these resources, will you do something about it? So another thing that I do is, because of the idea of the students feeling they have no power, right? They feel like they can't do anything about their situation. This negatively impacts their psychology and ultimately affects how they study and learn. I give them control where I can give them control. So another part that I let them decide on is the weight, actually, of their midterms, their finals, their recitations, quizzes, and assignments, right? I show them, this is for your course, because I teach a few courses. This is my standard weight. This is what I recommend. However, you're free to decide what weight you want. No questions asked. So they discuss it. I'm not there for the discussion. Then the beadle tells me this is what they want. I don't question their decision. And I ensure that they can see it on Canvas, on the LMS, that I implemented what they said. So this, again, empowers them. It helps them psychologically when they see that they deliberated on a matter, discussed it, and what they said or decided upon actually yielded results. Another thing is, again, because of candor, a principle that I follow is, given what I showed you in the discussion boards, there are so many rumors and myths around law school. And there is this mentality that the administration or the professors are out to get them, out to, again, there are these things called kill orders. Even when I was in law school, it's such a common myth. And again, it impacts their psychology and learning. So when it was face-to-face class, it just takes too much time, or sometimes I forget to fit it in to tell them, hey, these are the myths. That's not true. You'll see that these aren't true as we proceed with the semester. So knowing that the myths are pretty much the same every single year, I just come up with a page on those myths. I hit it straight on. I don't pussyfoot around it, and I try to counter the myths. Whether or not they believe me, that's later. That's for me to figure out later on. But at the very least, I did something to address the myths. I was trying to be candid. Another is, given the stoic environment of law school and the lack of trust between the students and the professor, they always think, again, aside from the conspiracy, that they're being tricked. I regularly ask them how they're feeling. So before every single class, this automatically comes up. A survey is released, so I don't have to, again, just on a matter of like not being hassle for the professor. It's programmed and it's released to them before every single class. And there is a study showing that people are hesitant to say that they're sad. The word sad, angry, depressed, because of the stigma, they feel hesitant to reveal exactly how they feel, right? So what I did was I used emojis. Again, didn't reinvent the wheel. They do this in many places, even in like commercial establishments. But I'm very specific. Today, I feel, then I gave them common emojis. And because, again, it wasn't words, they didn't feel stigma to use like the freaking out or like wailing emoji, right? And I did this regularly. And whenever I do it, I would actually also touch on it. Obviously, since it's anonymous, I didn't like isolate any students, but I would like address the elephant in the room. After the prayer and the attendance, I would say, I acknowledge that this is how some of you are feeling. I don't know if any of you are feeling like this because of this particular class or because of another class, but then I would try to figure out, again, I can't lower the standards of class, but at the very least acknowledging how they're feeling seemed to work, or at least seemed to help the situation. Then after every class is, again, I tried to simulate the student running after me in the hallway, right? At the end of class, the students who are shy, who didn't want to say anything during class, they'll run after me when I'm like a little far off from the classroom where their classmates can't see them talking to me anymore. So what I would do is, whether or not they scheduled an appointment, I would stay in class in the Zoom room for at least 15 minutes to simulate office hours. Because again, across the world, people notice the hesitance, that most students are hesitant, especially Asians, to schedule an appointment with the professor or office hours. But if I am there, just like I would be walking the hall no matter what at the end of every class, if I am there in the Zoom room when everyone else leaves no matter what, and someone can just re-enter to talk to me, then they'll make use of it. And that seemed to work. So sometimes it would connect to how they were feeling that day, or sometimes it would be like concrete questions. Then what I would do again before every module is give them a diagnostic exam. The diagnostic exam is not graded and they can take it as many times as they wanted. And the questions weren't throwaway questions. They were easier questions than another exam, but they were questions that they could expect on a quiz, on a regular quiz. And again, they can take this as many times as they wanted. It's just for them before class, again, to set the tone, for them to realize this is what I'll be looking for. Can you answer these questions? Then after every module, I would have a more difficult quiz, because again, we already conducted this, we used the Socratic method, we discussed the matter. And so we can now have a more difficult quiz that requires critical thinking. And in this quiz, I would ensure that the correct answers are immediately seen by them, right? So they can see why. So instead of just freaking out, they'll be able to understand and self-correct. This way, again, they're not just building up, or they're not just floating throughout the semester until it's their midterms or finals and realize they didn't actually understand anything. So that's why I did these two things. Then again, some of the things that I wish I did better was, since I created all these things on Canvas with lengthy explanations on why I'm doing this or the mechanics of everything, I tend to just assume that they read the explanations when I should have actually explained it during the synchronous session as well. Then another thing is, while I did emphasize transparency and letting them see the breakdown of their grades, and after each quiz, they could see how they did in quizzes. The problem is, again, this competitive field, the legal community, the high tension results in an increased grade consciousness. And sometimes I don't know if showing them their grades ends up distracting them from actually learning. So while my intention is transparency, accountability, and candor, sometimes it just freaks them out a little bit more when they think that they are behind the classroom or in danger of failing. Then another thing is, again, the reason why I embarked on this whole transparency, candor mission is because I felt that it was absurd that all the conspiracy theories that were around when I was a student is still around to this day, right? So I kept saying that they don't trust us, they don't trust us. But then I realized trust goes both ways, because when I have exams, I'm also thinking, oh, they're cheating. They have to be doing something nefarious when I'm not looking. And so it just stresses me out as well. So I have to remember that trust goes both ways. If I'm expecting them to trust me during this pandemic and high stress time, I should trust them that they want to learn and that they realize the enormous responsibility of being a lawyer, and that they will do their best to learn and not just game the system. So with that, these are a few of the sources. In case you're curious, if you want to see the public discussion of the students, or if you want to see any of the surveys or the recommendations, here are a few of the references. So with that, that's it for my slideshow.
So much, Ms. Rosales. The floor is now open for Q&A. You can ask your questions in the chat box below, or you can open your mic to ask your question. I do have a question po, Ms. Rosales. So you did talk about that trust and really checking in with your students. How do you really build it, especially in the online setting when you can't really interact with them as much? Is it really just through the quizzes, or are there other ways you try to gain that trust from
Again,
your
trust,
students?
psychologically speaking, for someone to trust something, they have to first like see evidence that their trust is not misplaced, right? So again, it means that if they ask for something and I say yes, they should visibly see in the LMS or concretely see that it happened, right? That it's not just all talk. So it's those small things. And then, for example, if I said that I take into consideration how they feel that day, like to a certain degree, it means during the after session when I hang around in Zoom that I will like ask more questions, right? Showing that I read or I factored in how they felt today. So it will show you have to it's like I guess like basic child psychology, right? When you say something, you have to show you mean it, and so you have to follow through. So it's always that whenever I say anything, I have to follow through. If I'm not ready with the follow through, I won't offer it or I won't say anything.
Thank you so much for that.
No, there's no other questions. I'm good to go.
I think we still have room for more questions. You want to ask anything to Ms. Rosales?
I mean, just a side note, I think one of the main points that or one of the main things that I tried to ensure is that, uh, again, many professors in the professional schools are part-time, so they don't really have the time to have these complex design systems, right? So I try to make the tools as simple as possible. Just like I tried to figure out which tools yielded the most impact among the students. So setting up surveys, be it again, I just used my LMS, but if you could use Google Forms or you could use Jot form and you just schedule when it's sent out to the students. The main point is it shouldn't make life harder for the students or for the professor in order to check in with them. The main point is again to ensure that they're focused on learning and not the conspiracy theories, because you'll be surprised the number of hours they spent exploring these conspiracy theories. One, they'll explore it on these public discussion boards. Two, they'll look for contacts and talk to these contacts, like be it like an alumnus or alumna of the school, alumni, um, professors that they know, and they will just dice or like again friends who are in other law schools, and they will dissect it to death. And instead of spending time studying or reading, they'll be spending time worrying about reading or studying or being graded. So the main point of all of these tools is to try to the best of our ability, try to get them to focus on why they're in school in the first place.
I feel like there aren't any
Yeah.
more questions. I think that ends our session with Ms. Rosales. If you have any thoughts or any questions, we invite you to share it through our site, jbcl.com. I'll flash it on the screen right now. Ayun. You'll also find this information on the chat box below. Our next session will be with Sir Juanito Chan on best practices in managing the online classroom. Once again, thank you so much for coming to ADL Exchange, and we hope you guys have a great day. For those who have another session in a different room, the links to them can be found on your emails. Thank you very much.